The Octarine Tree, a podcast exploring the meaning of ecology, spirit and human relationship. From southwestern Australia, I'm your host, Byron Joel. G'day mob, welcome back to the Octarine Tree podcast. Today I'm speaking with a chap named David Spicer, who's very well known, at least in the Australian permaculture and regenerative agricultural community and around the world increasingly. As you'll hear, he does a fair bit of work overseas, or did so before COVID. David grew up on a rural property in Tumut in New South Wales, and I have to say, of all the people I've met in this scene, in these fields, David is just about the most well-skilled individual that I know. There's a saying, I think David Holmgren, co-originator of permaculture, said in advice to people, permaculture students or otherwise, to be a jack of all trades and a master of two or three. Reminds me of the old Sufis, the mystic Islamic sect movement. The students of Sufism, I don't think monks is the right word, but the students of Sufism, part of their training, other than the meditative and mystical, was to be as skilled as possible. And I think they had to have 7 trades that they were highly skilled in, and at least a master of one. Dave Spicer is like that when it comes to working on the land and in these regenerative human systems. He can kind of do it all. He's taught me a whole lot, and he's a bloody pleasure to be around. He's a very valuable human being to have on your side, especially if the shit hits the fan. If the shit hits the fan, head to Tumut, New South Wales and ask around for David Spicer. I do seem to have a little bit of a cold today, a little bit slow, a little bit croaky, but other than that, it was lovely having a good chat with an old mate. In this chat, we talk about his time growing up, his discovery of permaculture, his time with Bill Mollison on Tagari Farm in Tasmania, his work in Morocco, his trips to Japan, earthworks, and his visions for the future. So without further ado, my mate David Spicer. So David Spicer, welcome to the Octarine Tree podcast, mate. How are you today? Been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, mate. Good, busy. Corona madness didn't slow life down, so, that's good. I went from 80% international work to, 100% national work, or statewide. All good, mate.
Awesome, good to hear. And where is here? Where are you at the moment?
Currently, on the banks of the Hawkesbury River, just out of Sydney, on a project I've been working on for a while. Now, most of you would have heard that most of the Hawkesbury or Richmond area where I am went underwater. We're sort of just doing a bit of repair work on a little bit of stuff and continue to move forward with the project.
So you were on that project before the flooding?
Yeah, yep.
And now you're patching things up, eh?
Yeah, it's just like where I was primarily working, the flood didn't affect it. There's a dam which catches a lot of stormwater from the road above it. So there's a hell of a lot of water come through, and we had a few little nicks and cuts. But for the amount of water that comes through the side, all's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that.
And where are you actually based nowadays? Are you back in Tumut area?
Yeah, I'm back in Tumut in southern New South Wales. For me and my darling partner, Ariadetta, who I think you did met years ago.
Yeah, we met.
Have 2 beautiful children now. And yeah, we've got a half-acre property just outside, in between Tumut and Gundagai. And hopefully we're about to sell it and look at purchasing a little bit bigger property and potentially with a few people, which sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Complicated, but interesting.
Yeah, that's always a bit complicated. You remember you and I and Barker were looking at land years ago up around the Shannon?
The Shannon, yeah. Nice country up there.
So you grew up around Tumut area, didn't you? You grew up in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have a pretty rural upbringing relative to like most kids?
Most definitely, yeah. We lived sort of where I grew up till I was about 11, but in that time, we were quite self-reliant, really. We had a large garden, we had dairy animals, we had meat, rabbit, fish. My father trapped rabbits for a while, and we done a lot of tanning. He sold the rabbit carcasses, and the pelts went to Kubra hats. We cut and distilled eucalyptus oil when I was a bit younger. So it was my job to drag out the heads of the trees out of the forest, cut mine props, fence posts, and worked on, farms. We were renting a house on a larger farm, and my dad would, help out with the sort of livestock management, mustering and marking and, drenching and all that sort of stuff. So I was involved in all that. I feel quite blessed, actually. It was pretty tough for some reasons, but in some ways I was very fortunate, and I didn't actually know how lucky I was until I got into this sort of whatever you want to call it, permaculture game or whatever. When I first went to Tagari Farm in 2000, I was actually astounded at the lack of skill of most people, and that's not being offensive to anyone.
No.
It's just that I was in some ways in a bubble of self-reliance, and you just do it, or you have a go at doing it, and that's the mindset. Yeah, so I'm very lucky.
I've mentioned it before, but Tagari Farm was the farm that old Bill Mollison started up in Tyalgum in northern New South Wales back in the 90s. I think he started it, maybe late 80s, I think. 90s. You went there in 2000.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Was that your first introduction to permaculture?
Look, I actually done a P2C with Bill in Tasmania the year before.
Right.
And I learned by doing, and I just asked Lisa Mollison where I could go to get some practical experience. And she put me in that direction. And, then I started to do the real learning just by engaging in the systems. Yeah, that's how I ended up there.
Did you find, for someone who already had a really strong background in rural life and farm work, what did you find permaculture actually added? I mean, what were you actually learning?
It's the interconnection that it gives. It's the systems thinking. Look, before I actually went to university for one day as a mature age student when I was 25.
One day.
And I sat at university and I was like, wow, nah, this is not for me. Anyway, but, synchronicity or whatever you want to call it, where I was staying, the lady put on Global Gardener, Bill Mollison's Global Gardener series.
Right.
And I was captivated because of his intellect, but his hands. And someone from me coming from a working background, the hands tell a story.
Yeah, it's true.
And when I seen Bill's hands, I knew he had not only the brains, but he had done the work. Yeah. And that's, powerful for me. So it saved my life, I say, true. Actually. And it was the interconnection because, before that, I worked in so many different jobs. I worked in agriculture, I worked in horticulture, in orchards, I worked in forestry, I worked in building, housing and earthworks, fencing. I mean, I've done lots and lots of different jobs and nothing give me the connection, Now, I'm sitting on a site where I can talk about fencing, I can talk about building, I can talk about earthworks because primarily that's what I do. But I've got experience in that, and permaculture really, whatever you want to call it, I don't care if you call it permaculture, whatever, but it's just systems thinking, ecological, smart design.
Yeah, holistic system.
Yeah, holistic system,
it is interesting because I've kind of found myself in the position now where I'm on larger gigs. I almost become by default like a lead consultant after a while, just whether or not I go in that capacity, I usually end up in that position because I'm at least conversant in the forestry, in the fencing, in the earthworks, in the animal systems. You know, I might not be a master of any of them, but I have an understanding and can talk that language at least.
Yeah.
So I end up kind of sitting in the middle as the guy talking to everyone and being able to arrange them in that holistic way, whereas otherwise they would just be separate systems going on.
Totally, mate. No, it's a very valid point.
But you said before as well, I heard you said that permaculture saved your life. Is that tongue-in-cheek, or did you mean that?
No, I'm 100% serious about that. I was an absolute furious young man, okay? I drank lots, and I done lots and lots of fighting, you know, street fighting.
Right.
I was pissed off. I was furious with the world. You know, I was building houses that are facing, and this is before I knew nothing, okay? Yeah. So we're building houses facing the road. In the middle of winter, you step inside the house, and it's dark and cold.
Yeah.
That's just stupidity. A brand new house, you know. Forestry that's just, but you can't call it forestry, actually. It's butchery.
Yeah.
You know, so much stuff that I see is butchery, and I'm fucking furious about it, actually. I'm still furious. I'm lucky I have somewhere to anchor myself and to vent and to pursue my, you know, positive movements.
Yeah,
but I'm still furious.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can have fun too and be angry.
You were really affected and still are by the impracticalities of systems that we are still perpetuating now.
Totally.
Does it piss you off?
Oh, fuck, absolutely. I mean, you know, where I'm working now, like, I have to drive through the western part of Sydney to get here.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing the urban sprawl of the new suburban, you know, subdivisions or developments, and it's just horrendous.
Yeah.
My kids who have travelled down there with me now, like, you know, Tayo's 10 and Isla's 7, and they're just looking at them, shaking their head, going, "But Dad, it doesn't make sense," you know, like. Yeah, it's just illogical.
That sprawl of Western Sydney has now taken over the old Yeoman's property of Yobani. That's a housing development now.
Yeah.
That should have been made some kind of national heritage site.
Yeah, I agree, mate. Totally, I agree.
Yeah.
And you know, there's this lady called, I can't remember her name, Judith Schwartz or something like that. She's American. She talks a lot about water. Very intelligent lady. But she said, I listened to a podcast, and she said, you can't blame urban people for not understanding the problem because their environment is so bland that their imagination is so bland.
Yeah.
Like if you step out of your house and onto concrete and into your car and into this and all into manicured human environments, then you can never understand and appreciate the wonder of nature. You know, because that's what we do. Like I think we are in awe of nature, you know, or natural systems. It's beauty, it's elegance. It's just mind-blowing. Because we are engaged and therefore we respect and we admire and want to align ourselves with and work with nature.
Yeah.
But a lot of people can't think that way, don't know why they need to. And it's really it's put me at peace, my point is.
You spent a fair bit of time around old Bill Mollison. Like you were fortunate enough to land in Tagari during the thick of it, and you were able-bodied and skilled and obviously got along with the guy pretty well, but you hung around a fair bit.
Yeah, I did. I mean, when I was at Tagari, Bill wasn't there. Mr. Lawton was there. But then in 2007, I went down to Tasmania, and I worked for Bill and Lisa down there for just under a year as farm manager down there. So, look, you know, shared many cups of tea, and went fishing and lots of bush stories. And, you know, I had some similarities because my father sort of grew up in a similar situation to Bill, as in, you know, he was younger, but, you know, they trapped rabbits, they worked in the forestry, and I had exposure to all that, which is probably an unusual thing for someone of my age to still be exposed to that harsh reality of bush life.
Yeah, there's something like the Australian character. I grew up in the burbs, but the way you grew up feels to me the way like many Australians grew up maybe a whole generation or two before, you know, like bush life.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Not even country. Like it doesn't even feel, not just country.
No.
Because some people live in the country, but they get up in the morning and they drive a combine harvester around, you know. You lived old school.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have been exposed to that life and that mindset too. Actually, that just do it. You know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of probably meaningless work and butchery that went on with that life. But in saying that, you know, you got to respect and admire their survival skills. Yeah. Because it was a hard life.
Life back in the like and I'm not saying you grew up in a pre-industrial state, but life in a kind of, but then I was going to say the pre-industrial world or a real living on the land context.
Yeah.
Anywhere can be tough. But I think Australians have lost the appreciation for how hard it was in Australia during the colonial era. And I mean, I'm not trying to paint them as victims and all sorts of gnarly shit went down. But
of course.
To be living in a land that didn't resemble the homeland of the European people, to try to like apply the skills or what life skills and land skills they had that worked on their landscape back in Europe in Australia would have been extremely tough.
Totally, mate. I think that's a really, really relevant point, actually. You know, like 2 years ago, I went to Georgia in America for a job over there. And, like really great guy, Doug Roberts and his family. But, you know, and he'd been there, their land was actually some of the first land that was taken off the American Indians in Georgia. But what it gave me in this insight that here they are, they come from Europe, they had the same environment, you know, same sort of biome in a sense, you know.
Not very similar.
And these skills were just passed on.
Yep.
And it really made me think the challenge of Australia.
Absolutely.
You know, Australians, when we come from Europe to here, totally different landscape, vegetation, everything, you know, it's just a mind twister. Yeah. It is a real mind twister. And the mind twister is how do we actually get back to a sustainable culture? How do we can't rebirth it? How do we
go forward to one?
Yeah, exactly, mate. Yeah.
Well, Australia's never had one.
No, I agree.
Yeah, like in the US, they did, apart from the fact that they're a couple of 100 years older than us in terms of the European occupation. They've had functioning village life. They formed folk culture that was, to a larger degree than here at least, tied to the land and the natural cycles because it was so similar. I mean, no, it's not identical, but Northern America, many parts, is very similar to the landscape that they came from.
Yes.
Over here, it's like almost alien.
Yeah. I think, like, you know, Australia has some benefits in that, like, my wife's Japanese, and she loves Australia because it gives her freedom.
Yeah.
You know, there's no cultural boundaries in place. And I think that's a gift for us, and we've got to rebuild our culture. And I firmly believe our culture is going to be rebuilt or rebirthed through food, actually, through sharing food, through sharing culturally diverse food and communicating about food. And that's my belief anyway. I want to see that happen. Well, you know how powerful food is.
Absolutely.
And it has so much power and so much engagement.
Yeah.
And I think that can actually get people from different cultures or different backgrounds or beliefs. I think it can give us a common denominator.
Yeah. Do you remember the time I smuggled corned beef down from my house to you at Zaytuna? And Geoff...
I do remember that.
Geoff thought it was contraband because it was all wrapped up in alfoil.
Today's episode of the Octarine Tree is brought to you by Facebook. Should be working, but instead Facebook. Traffic lights have turned red, Facebook. Got 5 minutes, take a shit, Facebook. 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 supervised by the lady handler.
The fun days, as they do.
He came over like ready to backhand us, and like, what is that? Unwrapped it. It was bloody corned beef. He had a good laugh.
Not pickled pork, so that was lucky.
True. That was good fun. You know, like I did a couple of years here and there working on actual permaculture farms and institutes, and for all their dysfunction, because they can be pretty dysfunctional, but man, it's so invigorating, so much fun. That year in particular, I had so much fun with Barker and yourself dropping in every now and then, and Marcelo, and or just all the woofers and the students and international. You know, when you're in that environment and you've got this constant stream of students and woofers and teachers from overseas, and you know, there's doctors and accountants and lawyers and scientists and painters and plumbers and artists, just everyone from all types all around the world, and the discussions are so invigorating, and everyone's just in the zone. Is what it feels like.
Yes, no, I totally agree with you, mate. I mean, you know, I think we do generate our own luck, but in saying that, you know, I feel very blessed or lucky to be involved in all that, and you know, that's why I'm sitting here today. Yeah. You know, where I am today is from all them interactions. Yeah. And met my first wife at Tagari Farm. Yeah. And now, you know, I met my second wife at Zaytuna.
I remember. You, like myself, actually, you've taken a few return trips to Morocco to do work, haven't you?
Yeah. I've been to Morocco 4 times.
Tell us about your experiences in Morocco and how the similarities or differences from Australia. There were times when I was driving down roads in Morocco, and with the landscape and the eucalyptus and the casuarina and the acacias, I thought to myself, if it wasn't for all the donkeys, I could be somewhere in Australia right now.
I'm 100% with you there, mate. With Laurent Levy, I remember driving down the road and he was listening to an Australian band on the radio, and I could have sworn, as you said, you know, in an overgrazed, degrading landscape with a few eucalypts sticking around, I could have sworn I was in Australia, and multiple times I could have sworn I was in Australia, you know, on a lot of the landscape. And in fact, actually, you know, we've got a hill, like a steep ridge west of our house, which is continuously overgrazed by sheep. And that's my Moroccan hill, you know. I can see Morocco coming to Australia, you know, particularly 2 years ago, like when we were right in the heart of that drought before the fires come. To me, there was no difference, you know. Overgrazed, mismanaged.
Morocco is like this postcard for 10,000 years of deleterious agricultural effect on the landscape. Hey, you can actually watch Morocco go from a rounded, humid landscape to a kind of squared, eroded, desertifying one in real time.
It is a shame, yeah. But, you know, there's some good people there in Morocco now, and there's some really good stuff happening, you know, which I'm very, very excited about. So, look, you know, I've been lucky to do some work in Morocco, which is great, you know.
It's done a fair bit of earthworks over there, and it's one of those places where remedial earthworks can really shine. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, after going to Laurent, and I sort of showed him and his guys how to do these one rock dams, or, you know, like tiny little check dams, and I got some good footage from that. And then the second time, last time I went to Morocco, I went to the High Atlas to a place called École Vivienne, which is a school, a private school set up by a lady called Ido, who was German, who married a Berber guy, and she didn't want to send her kids to the classic Moroccan school, so she set up her own school. And look, I had tears walking through the school. It's just incredible what they do. But it's amazing, mate. It is really École Vivienne it's called. And what they do is bloody incredible. Like if people can't afford to send their kids to that school, the parents are allowed to come in and work for the tuition fee.
Really?
It's based off, it's a little bit like a Steiner school, but it's based off a Swiss model. But, you know, and it's only 5 acres what we were working on, but there's City Musa, which is the big mountain next to it. The school had flooded. They only get 250 mil rain, but they do get summer storms there. And the school had flooded, okay? Again, because it's overgrazing. There's no management of the livestock.
None of the water is caught. It's just a big drain.
Exactly. People have been killed in the middle of summer from storms.
Oh, yeah, totally. Not rare over there.
Yeah, multiple times. Yeah, absolutely. But what was kind of profound is we've done these little, like crescent moon shaped or, one rock dams in little water courses or tiny rills and all that.
Yeah.
And because that was at human scale and the kids could see that and they actually went out and done that, they've taken that knowledge and they've taken it to their landscape and their farms and they're starting to do that. Oh, that's a huge win for me.
Great.
Yeah, that's success.
Oh, absolutely.
At a human scale.
That's as good as it gets, man, when you see them recreating by themselves. And of all the things they could do, they do it high up in the landscape and they're doing it en masse. It's going to have real effect.
A huge effect.
I'd love to go back. I would so love to go back and work with the villages I was there before because you could feel the potential there. The landscape could absolutely hum. And when they do get a decent summer rain as well. If the landscape was set up in a way to catch and make best use of that water, they could do amazing things. There is something really valuable and heartwarming about working in dryland systems. And I was talking to, Neil Spackman?
Yeah. Got a lot of respect for Neil.
Yeah.
Done a great job.
Likewise. So I was having a chat with him and he's just going to the nuts and bolts of how the systems work that he installed over there in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And there's something really satisfying about drylands work. And when you actually put those leaky weirs or check dams or check drains or whatever you want to call them into the landscape, there's just something so satisfying about seeing the rain come and the silt and organic matter getting caught behind those rocks and it building up. They're perfect places to plant trees and they hold the water for longer and they seep the water out for longer after the rains. And if you've got enough of them in over a landscape, you actually get, trickling water through the summer season again.
Yep.
There's something just so satisfying about working on dry land environments. Do you feel that?
Oh, totally, mate. Totally. It's a big challenge, and you turn up and you go, oh my God, where do you start? But you start at the top, and if you apply that, you don't need a big machine. You can do a hell of a lot with what you're just talking about. And I think that's profound. Yeah, it is. And like I'm saying that there's a property in just near Canberra in Braidwood. When the bushfires were on 2 years ago, they were pulling out something like 2 megalitres a day out of these leaky weir systems that they had installed, and they were recharged. They were filling back up from that plumed landscape, from that water stuck in the landscape, which is quite profound.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one that it is talked about, but not as much as it should be. Just the passive rehydration of landscape.
Yes, yeah. No, we need it, mate. We're lucky this year, but go have a look last year where we were. We need to change our behaviour. We need more examples. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's the simple things that often are the most powerful, I think.
You would have thought like enough little 1, 2, 3 wall check dams high in a landscape can have such an effect downstream.
Totally.
So you obviously with COVID, you're not getting overseas much anymore.
No, I haven't been overseas for 2 years. I'm loving it actually because I haven't been on a plane. It's great. Yeah, look, I miss it. I could have went to Morocco at the beginning of the year with EcoAsia. They wanted me to come over with another guy. What's his name? Ludovic Bourron. He's a French guy, a mate of mine who's asked me to come, but I didn't go anyway. So I'm managing to get about a bit. And I've got this project here, and I've got more.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we're just getting work, more work, which is coming, which is great. Primarily earthworks. Ecosia have a project in Morocco where they're planting. I think it's about 600 hectares. It's a big project where Lodovic is a consultant for them. And in the north part of Morocco, they'll be planting trees.
So have you been to Japan?
Yeah, multiple times. I love Japan. I'd move there tomorrow in the mountains, in the forest.
Really?
Oh, it's gorgeous, mate.
Yeah.
Oaks and chestnuts and cherries and persimmons. So much food.
Really?
So much. This comes back to what we were talking about before. When you talk about the Americans coming to, the Europeans coming to America, same vegetation type. It's like going to Japan and I see oak trees and I see chestnuts and cherries and persimmons, and I go, oh my God, you're so lucky, because it's that blessed environment, So I'd move there tomorrow in the mountains, definitely. So the pollution from China's terrible, but we're in Kyushu, so in the South main island of Japan. But it's beautiful. I love it. I love the culture.
So the pollution blows in. You can feel it all the way from China, the smog and stuff.
The mountain ranges are blocked out. They're not that high. You can't see maybe 100 metres above ground height when it comes in. You can't see the mountains.
Oh shit, that's unfortunate. What about like the traditional systems over there? I've got mates who are carpenters and even myself, like the tools, their hand tools are so awesome.
They're beautiful.
I got a hori knife the other day. Have you seen the hori knives? Hori knives? They're a gardening tool. They're like a cross between a knife and a garden spade.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Yep.
That and a pair of secateurs and I'm set. That's all I have. Even when I do farm work now, they're amazing. They're hand tools, like the way the Japanese, it's just about perfection, right? Like they just get it right. They take the time. Have you had a look around any traditional systems off in the countryside of Japan?
Yeah, no, I have. I've been very lucky. A few years ago we visited Tako Furuno, the dark rice and power duck. We've Aries, my partner's father, has taken us up into the mountains quite a few times, and we've seen some old style sort of rice paddy, old houses. But I'm a tool fan as well. Any blacksmith place I stop and I draw and I purchase. I mean, I love Japanese tools and the quality of them. If I see an old building, I take photos. I love it. I just love the earthiness of it. But Japanese tools are, I've got kamas and sickles and chisels and, hooks and, I mean, I've spent up pretty big when I've been to Japan when I can, and I'm ready to go again.
You're going to get that tool bug.
It's the efficiency, they're just nice to use. They're well designed, as you say, they're balanced, they're, great steel quality, they just make manual labour so much more fun. It's where we've got to go. I think we've got to have a rebirth of these skills, mate,
Yeah.
And and that's how we'll build our identity. It's like the French, the French they're so proud of their individual region. They have this pride, and I think that's kind of powerful. And this is where this, I don't know, what would you call it? This sameness that the Western culture has developed, or the modern Western culture, McDonald's culture.
Yeah.
Everything's the same wherever you go. Blah.
I call it the industrialised culture.
The industrialised culture, yeah. It's just, there's no soul. No soul attached to the landscape and what the landscape produces. I think that's going to be a rebirth of culture too. We've got a big journey ahead of us.
We do, but I think, it's going to be a bumpy road, but I've got great faith we're actually going to go somewhere quite amazing. And that's something that gets me a lot. I've been asked to do a talk to critique the Davos Institute Great Reset and its approach to ecology and agriculture.
Okay.
And one of the points that keeps coming back to me is just the lack of concern for the loss in regional and local identities around the world.
Yeah.
We mourn the loss of species, but we don't seem to give so much concern for the loss of particular human cultural forms or language types. And in a world where there's this weird dichotomy where you're either a globalist and you're all for pulling down boundaries between countries and dissolving any national identity. If you are pro-national or regional identity, then you're some kind of right-wing thug.
Yeah.
But there is a positive aspect to what we might, it's not even nationalism, but bioregionalism. It's one of the most beautiful things there is that human sense of even identity, individual or collective identity, based on a human relationship with the landscape that goes back countless generations. Like, I am of these people and we are of this place.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, like even in Europe, every, not just region, but every valley, every village had its own food types and song and tartan and clothing and dog breeds and cheeses and so diverse. Like when I was in Morocco, I remember teaching this village over there. Like it was an amazing experience over with Ollie in the foothills of the Rif Mountains. One of the things I tried to get across to them was that try to hang on to that, like have pride in your regional identity, because the alternative that's becoming increasingly apparent around the world is just this, beige homogeny. Everything is the bloody same. The old fellas in the room were really glad, really, really thankful that I had said that. Because the kids were listening to me. Like they wouldn't listen to the old folk, their own elders, but they were listening to me. And the kind of penny dropped with them. I'm like, okay, right, yeah.
Yes, that's a really great point, mate. The first time I actually went to Morocco, I can remember sitting in a village called Igordain, and this young guy, through the translator, electricity had come to the village a year before, and therefore TV. And this young guy said, I want to trade my donkey in for a car and move to the city, because they seen that was the dream. They didn't want to live a life of poverty, So that was
and that's understandable, if you want to
it is
wanting to escape poverty. I mean,
look, I think this is a really relevant point, Byron, like that we need to sort of hammer down that we can create a beautiful life in the country. I'm happy to live in the country, more than happy.
Yeah, and when kids, they might look at a field and think, there's nothing happening. But when one has acclimatized to the subtleties of the natural world and the patterns that are going on therein and it's a hive of activity. There's so much happening in any shot in any direction when you're out in nature or in the countryside. You know what I mean? Like to the untrained eye, it can look like nothing's happening. But when you catch that bug, that's what I love about it. I love it. When a young person might be really into skateboarding and they kind of obsess over it and they're really into it and they get to know all the tricks and all the moves and all the best brands of the decks and the wheels and the trucks and the bearings and all the coolest skaters and who's doing what around the world and all the new fads. So you get really into it, right?
Yep.
Whenever you're passionate about something. When you catch that bug about the natural world and the human relationship to the natural world, suddenly the entire world is extremely interesting and really, really passionate about it. But it's a really beautiful thing to be able to just step outside. And some of the most amazing conversations I've ever had were just hanging out with other people in this field, going on car trips or going for a long walk, and just being able to spot this and spot that and talk about this and talk about that passion for the natural world and the human relationship to it is actually extremely invigorating. And it's a really beautiful thing.
Yep, totally, mate. And I feel very blessed in what I've managed to become known for or primarily do, and that's plant the water. Because once you plant water, then life expresses itself even more, which is so cool. So cool.
Well, and you are bloody good at it, and you are getting you've already got a reputation for being bloody good at it. So I'll leave you there, mate, because signals it is getting a bit wobbly. Yep. But can you let the listeners know where they can go to get hold of you or see what you do, or maybe even say good day?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. G'day, listeners. Well, you can look at docspicepermaculture.com on the website, or you can look at docspice_permaculture on Instagram. But what I wanted to say is I'd like to start sharing more of what I've learned.
Yeah.
And try to do some more video, just to empower people. Yeah, that's my aim.
Yeah, I think so. I'd really encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to.
I've seen your work, and it's really awesome. It's beautiful, and I for one, would love to see more of it.
No worries. Well, thanks, Warren. Pleasure, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no worries, mate. All good. Okay.
I hope to share a beer with you sooner than later.
No worries. One day, mate. But look, the world's a small place at times.
It is. All right, mate. All the best.
All right, mate.
See you, buddy.
Okay, take care.